The first time it happened, he was 5 years old. His kindergarten teacher had asked him what color crayon he wanted, and his mouth just froze. The word was right there in his head, clear as day, blue. Just one simple word. But when he tried to say it, his lips trembled and nothing came out. He tried again. His face turned red as the other kids stared. Finally, after what felt like forever, the word stumbled out in broken pieces. That was the beginning. His parents noticed it too, of course. At home during dinner, simple conversations became struggles. Asking for more juice turned into a battle. Saying goodnight took several attempts. His mom would lean in close, patient and gentle, telling him to take his time. His dad would look away, pretending not to notice the struggle, thinking maybe that would help. It didn't. By the time he reached second grade, reading aloud in class had become his personal version of torture. Every student had to take turns reading a paragraph from their books. He would count the paragraphs, figure out which one would be his, and practice it silently over and over in his head. Sometimes he got lucky and the words came out mostly smooth, but most times they didn't. He would stand there, book in hand, and the first word would get stuck. His mouth would open and close like a fish out of water. The silence in the classroom was deafening. Then came the giggles. Quiet at first, just a few kids trying to hold it in. Then louder. His teacher would say something like, "That's enough," or "Be respectful," but the damage was already done. He could feel 20 pairs of eyes on him, some pitying, some amused, all of them making him wish he could disappear. The worst part wasn't even the laughing. It was the waiting, the horrible stretching silence while everyone sat there, waiting for him to spit out a simple word that any other kid could say without thinking. He started to dread school. Sunday nights filled him with anxiety, knowing Monday morning was coming. His parents took him to a speech therapist when he was 7. Nice lady, warm office, lots of colorful posters on the walls. She taught him breathing exercises. In for 4 counts, out for 4 counts. She had him practice saying words slowly, breaking them into syllables. She recorded his voice and played it back so he could hear himself. None of it worked the way it was supposed to. Sure, in that quiet office with just her, he could sometimes get through sentences okay. But put him back in a classroom or in the cafeteria or anywhere with other kids and the stutter came roaring back. By 4th grade, he had developed strategies. He learned to swap words. If he felt a stutter coming on tomorrow, he'd quickly switch to the next day in his head. If homework wouldn't come out, he'd try assignment instead. He became a master at restructuring sentences in real time, all to avoid getting stuck on certain sounds. The letter B was his enemy. So were P and T sounds at the start of words. He kept mental lists of dangerous words and safe alternatives. He also learned to be invisible. In class discussions, he never raised his hand. During group projects, he volunteered to do the written parts, never the presentations. At lunch, he sat quietly while others talked. He laughed at their jokes, nodded along with their stories, but rarely contributed his own. It was safer that way. Middle school made everything worse. Kids that age have a special talent for finding weaknesses and exploiting them. There was one group in particular, the popular kids who ruled the cafeteria and the hallways. They figured out pretty quickly that mocking the way he talked was comedy gold, at least in their minds. They would approach him between classes. "Hey, can you tell us where the bathroom is?" they'd say, imitating his stutter with exaggerated facial expressions. Their friends would crack up. He'd walk away, face burning, trying to act like it didn't bother him. But it did. God, it did. The thing about bullying is that it doesn't just hurt in the moment. It plants seeds that grow into something darker. Every time someone mocked his stutter, it reinforced this idea that his voice was wrong, that he was broken, that he should be ashamed every time he opened his mouth. Those seeds grew into silence. He stopped trying to speak up, even when he knew answers in class. Teachers would ask questions and he'd sit there knowing exactly what to say, but refusing to raise his hand. It was better to be seen as quiet than to be laughed at again. Better to be invisible than vulnerable. At home, his parents tried everything. His mom bought books about famous people who stuttered. Did you know that the King of England had a stutter? She'd tell him. They made a movie about it. He'd nod politely, but inside he'd think, yeah, but he was a king. I'm just a kid who can't talk right. His dad took a different approach. You've got to toughen up, he'd say, not unkindly but firmly. The world isn't going to wait for you to get your words out. You've got to push through it. He meant well, but those words just added pressure. Now it wasn't just about getting words out. It was about not being weak. His younger sister didn't have any trouble talking. Words just flowed out of her like water. She could chat with anyone about anything. Sometimes he'd watch her and feel this strange mix of love and envy. How easy everything was for her. How she'd never know what it felt like to be trapped inside your own mouth. The loneliest moments were at night. He'd lie in bed, and his mind would replay every stumbled word from that day. Every stuck syllable. Every impatient look from someone waiting for him to finish a sentence. Every laugh. He'd practice conversations in his head, saying all the things he wished he could say smoothly. In his mind, he was eloquent. In his mind, words danced off his tongue like poetry. But morning always came, and with it, the reality that his mind and his mouth weren't on speaking terms. By the time he finished middle school, he had built walls around himself. Thick ones. He had learned that silence was safer than speaking. That being alone was better than being mocked. That his thoughts were better kept inside where they couldn't betray him. He had become an expert at making himself small, at taking up as little space as possible, at hoping people would forget he was even there. What he didn't know yet was that those walls, built for protection, were also becoming a prison, and that the voice he was working so hard to hide would one day become the very thing that set him free. But that realization was still years away. For now, he was just a kid who couldn't talk right, trying to survive one day at a time in a world that had no patience for the space between his words. High school was supposed to be a fresh start. That's what everyone said. New building, new people, new opportunities. But for him, it was just the same nightmare in a bigger package. The school had over 2,000 students. You'd think that would make it easier to blend in, to disappear into the crowd, and in some ways it did. He could walk through the hallways without standing out. Could eat lunch in corners of the cafeteria where nobody noticed. Could skip assemblies by hiding in the library. But the problem with being invisible is that you're still there. You're just suffering quietly. English class was the worst. Not because of the reading, though that was still torture, but because of presentations. The teacher, Mrs. Patterson, believed strongly in public speaking skills. "You'll need this in the real world," she'd say cheerfully, assigning speech after speech. Informative speeches. Persuasive speeches. Book reports delivered standing in front of the class. Each assignment filled him with dread that started weeks in advance. He'd write brilliant speeches, stay up late crafting perfect sentences, choosing words carefully, making sure his arguments were solid. On paper, his work was excellent. Mrs. Patterson would write comments like "great analysis" and "thoughtful perspective." But then came the delivery and everything fell apart. Standing in front of 30 teenagers, his heart would pound so hard he could hear it in his ears. The first word would stick in his throat like a stone. The silence would stretch. Someone would cough. Someone else would whisper. Then his face would turn red. Sweat would bead on his forehead, and the stutter would take over completely. What should have been a 5-minute speech would stretch to 10 agonizing minutes of starts and stops and painful silences. The absolute worst moment came during sophomore year. He was giving a speech about climate change. He'd researched for weeks, had statistics and facts, had practiced at home until his mom said it sounded great. But standing there under those fluorescent lights, he got stuck on the word pollution. His mouth opened and closed. The P sound wouldn't come. He tried again, and again. 15 seconds passed. Then 30. Someone in the back row started timing it on their phone. Finally, another student, trying to be helpful, whispered the word, pollution. But that somehow made it worse. Now he couldn't say it, and everyone knew exactly what word he was stuck on. When he finally got through the speech and sat down, his hands were shaking. The kid who'd timed him announced new record loud enough for people nearby to hear. They laughed. Not everyone, but enough. That night he made a decision. He'd take the grade hit and just stop doing presentations. He'd offer to write extra papers instead, do additional homework, anything but stand up and speak. Mrs. Patterson wasn't happy about it. She called his parents, expressed concern, talked about the importance of facing fears, but he was done. Some fears weren't meant to be faced. The bullying in high school was different from middle school. More subtle, more cruel. There was a group of guys, the type who thought they were comedians, who'd discovered something they found hilarious. They'd see him in the hallway, come up and pretend to ask him genuine questions. "Hey man, what time does lunch start?" Or "Did we have homework in history?" He'd start to answer. and the moment he stuttered, they'd pounce. They'd imitate it back to him, making exaggerated faces, their friends cracking up. Then they'd walk away like nothing happened. If a teacher saw, they'd play innocent. What? We were just asking him a question. The thing is, it wasn't every day. That almost would have been easier to deal with. Instead, it was random. He'd go a week without incident and start to relax, start to feel almost normal. Then boom, they'd corner him by the lockers and it would start again. The randomness meant he could never let his guard down. He walked through school in a constant state of anxiety, never knowing when the next attack would come. He stopped going to the cafeteria completely. Instead, he'd eat lunch in the art room where a nice teacher, Mr. Chen, let students hang out. It was quieter there, mostly kids who were drawing or painting, too focused on their work to notice him. He'd sit in the corner, eat his sandwich, and scroll through his phone. Safe, alone, miserable. His phone became his lifeline and his prison. He could text fluently, could have entire conversations through messages without a single stutter. Online, he was articulate and funny. He'd join group chats with kids from school and contribute jokes, comments, observations. Behind a screen, his thoughts could flow freely. But when Monday came and he'd see those same people in person, he'd go silent again. They probably thought he was weird, funny online, but mute in real life. They weren't wrong. He started avoiding phone calls completely. When his phone rang, anxiety would spike. Even calling to order pizza filled him with dread. What if he got stuck on pepperoni? What if they couldn't understand him? What if they laughed? He'd rather just order online, even if it meant paying extra fees. His parents noticed. His mom would ask, "Why don't you call grandma anymore?" He'd shrug, make excuses. The truth was too embarrassing to admit. His dad still pushed the toughen up message, but it had evolved. Now it was about the future. How are you going to get a job if you can't talk in interviews? How are you going to support yourself? These questions haunted him. His dad was right, of course. The real world wouldn't care about his stutter. Employers wouldn't wait patiently for him to finish sentences. College professors wouldn't excuse him from presentations. He was heading toward a future that terrified him. Junior year, something shifted. Not for the better, really. Just different. He gave up on trying to speak in most situations and developed an elaborate system of avoidance. He'd memorize his class schedules so he never had to ask for directions. He'd observe where his classrooms were before school started so he wouldn't have to ask anyone. He learned to communicate through nods, gestures, and written notes when absolutely necessary. Teachers started to describe him as shy. Guidance counselors noted his reluctance to participate. Report cards would say things like, "Needs to engage more in class discussion," and "should work on verbal communication skills." None of them understood that it wasn't shyness, it wasn't reluctance, it was survival. The irony was that inside his head he had so much to say. During class discussions, he'd have insights and opinions and arguments. He'd disagree with something someone said and have the perfect counterpoint. But it all stayed locked inside. His English teacher would discuss books and he'd have interpretations that would blow people's minds, but they'd never hear them. In history, he'd catch factual errors that other students made, but he'd never correct them. All these thoughts, all these words trapped behind a mouth that wouldn't cooperate. At night, he started writing. Not for school, but for himself. He'd fill notebooks with everything he couldn't say during the day. Observations about people at school. Opinions about movies and music. Rants about how unfair everything felt. Stories he made up. Poems that didn't quite rhyme. The words flowed perfectly on paper, each one exactly where it should be, no stuttering, no stopping, no shame. It was the only place he felt free. His mom found one of his notebooks once. He'd left it on the kitchen table. She didn't say anything at first, just left it back where she found it. But that evening, she knocked on his door. "You're a beautiful writer," she said quietly. "Have you ever thought about taking a writing class? Or joining the school newspaper?" He shrugged. The newspaper would mean meetings, discussions, working with other people. Too risky, but the seed was planted. He started looking at writing differently, not just as a personal outlet, but as a potential path forward. Maybe he could be a writer, work from home, communicate through email, never have to speak in meetings or give presentations. It seemed like a dream solution. A way to have a voice without actually having to use his voice. Senior year rolled around, and with it came the pressure of college applications. The thought of college interviews terrified him. Some schools required them. He carefully researched which ones didn't. crossing off prestigious universities that demanded face-to-face conversations. His guidance counselor suggested he mention his stutter in his application essays, frame it as overcoming adversity. But he couldn't bring himself to write about it. Putting it into words, even written words, felt like admitting defeat. The applications asked about extracurricular activities. He had none. They wanted to know about leadership positions. He had none. Tell us about a time you made your voice heard, one essay prompt demanded. He stared at that question for an hour, cursor blinking on an empty document. How do you write about making your voice heard when you'd spent 4 years of high school making sure nobody heard you at all? He got accepted to a state university 40 miles from home. Not his dream school, but decent, affordable, and most importantly, big enough that he could disappear. His parents were proud, relieved. His dad clapped him on the back. College will be different, he said. Fresh start. Those words again. Fresh start. As if geography could fix what was broken inside him. The summer before college, something unexpected happened. He was bagging groceries at the local supermarket, a job that required minimal talking, when an older customer started chatting with him. She asked him about college, what he planned to study. He stuttered through his answers, face burning with familiar shame. But instead of looking away or getting impatient, she just listened, really listened. Waited for each word without any sign of annoyance. When he finally finished, she smiled. My grandson has a stutter too, she said. He's in college now. Found some support group that really helped him. She wrote down the name of it on a grocery receipt and handed it to him. He mumbled thanks and shoved it in his pocket. Pretty sure he'd throw it away later, but he didn't throw it away. That receipt stayed in his pocket through his last shift, through dinner that night, through the next few weeks. Sometimes he'd pull it out and look at it. A support group. For people like him, people who understood. It felt both appealing and terrifying. Appealing because maybe, just maybe, he wasn't as alone as he felt. Terrifying because it would mean admitting out loud that he needed help, that he couldn't handle this on his own. As summer ended and college loomed closer, he kept that receipt, folded and refolded so many times the writing started to fade. He told himself he probably wouldn't go, probably wouldn't even look it up. But late at night, unable to sleep, he'd think about it, about what it might be like to be in a room full of people who got stuck on words just like him, who knew what it felt like to be trapped inside their own mouth, who understood that the silence between words wasn't emptiness but a war being fought inside. College was coming. A fresh start, everyone said. But he knew better now. You can't outrun the voice inside your head. You can't leave behind a stutter by changing your address. Wherever he went, it went too. The question wasn't whether college would be different. The question was whether he'd find the courage to try to make it different. And right now, sitting in his childhood bedroom surrounded by boxes packed for a new life, he honestly didn't know the answer. College started exactly as he expected. Big campus, thousands of students, and him trying to be invisible once again. His dorm roommate was friendly enough, a guy from California who talked constantly about surfing and his high school girlfriend. He tried to include him in conversations, but after a few stuttered responses, seemed to realize it was easier to just talk at him rather than with him. It stung, but it was familiar. Easier somehow than constantly explaining himself. The first month was survival mode. He figured out which dining halls were quietest, which times of day he could shower without running into too many people, which routes across campus let him avoid the crowded main pathways. He went to classes, sat in the back, never raised his hand. His professors didn't know his name. That was fine with him, but something was different here. The receipt from that summer, the one with the support group name, had made it into his desk drawer. He'd see it sometimes when looking for pens or paper. The group apparently met on campus, Thursday evenings in the student center. He'd walk by there sometimes on Thursdays, glance at the room number on the door but never go in. 6 weeks into the semester, something cracked. He was in his communication class, the one required class he couldn't avoid when the professor announced presentation assignments. Pairs would have to give a 10-minute speech together. His chest tightened. Not this again. But this time there was no opting out. 40% of his grade. His partner was assigned randomly. A girl named Jennifer who seemed nice but clearly had no idea what she was getting into. They met at the library to plan. He tried to explain through text beforehand that he had a stutter, that maybe she should do most of the talking. She texted back, "No worries, we'll figure it out," with a smiley face. He appreciated the positivity but knew she didn't understand the reality. At the library, sitting across from her with their notes spread out, he tried to discuss their topic. The words stuck immediately. Jennifer waited, patient at first, then clearly uncomfortable. She started finishing his sentences, trying to help. It made everything worse. After 20 painful minutes, she gently suggested, "Maybe you could make the slides and I'll do the presenting?" Her tone was kind, but he heard what she really meant. "You can't do this." He nodded, grateful for the escape but humiliated. Another person who'd learned that working around his stutter was easier than working with it. He went back to his dorm, threw his bag on the floor, and for the first time since high school actually cried. Not dramatic sobbing, just quiet tears of frustration and shame. This was college. His fresh start. And nothing had changed. That night, past midnight, unable to sleep, he pulled out his laptop. He looked up the support group. The website was basic but active. Photos from meetings showed people laughing, talking, looking comfortable. The description said it was a safe space for students with speech differences to practice communication and support each other. Every Thursday at 7. No pressure, just show up. He stared at his screen for probably an hour, read testimonials from students who said the group changed their lives, saw a video of one guy talking about how he'd gone from avoiding all conversations to running for student government. It seemed impossible, like those before and after photos that were too good to be true. But something in him was desperate enough to wonder, what if? Thursday came. He went to his classes in a fog, barely paying attention. The whole day was just waiting for 7 o'clock and the decision he'd have to make. Go to the meeting or don't. Speak or stay silent. Risk being vulnerable or stay safe behind his walls. At 6:45, he found himself walking toward the student center. His hands were sweating. His heart was racing. This was stupid. He should turn back. But his feet kept moving forward almost on their own. He reached the right room, heard voices inside. Normal, casual conversation. He stood outside the door for a full 5 minutes, hand on the doorknob, frozen. Then the door opened from the inside. A guy about his age, tall with glasses, smiled at him. "You coming in? We don't bite." He had a slight stutter on bite. It was the first time someone's stutter had made him feel less alone rather than more embarrassed. He stepped inside. The room had about 15 people sitting in a circle of chairs. Some were chatting, some were quiet like him. Nobody looked perfect or put together. They just looked normal. Real. The guy who'd opened the door, who introduced himself as Tyler, gestured to an empty chair. "First time?" He nodded. "Cool, no pressure. You can just listen if you want. We usually go around and check in, but you can pass." The meeting started casually. People shared about their weeks. A girl talked about successfully ordering coffee without getting stuck on the word caramel. Everyone cheered like she'd won an award. A younger guy shared that he'd raised his hand in class for the first time all semester. More cheers. The energy was weird, celebrating things most people did without thinking. But in this room it made sense. When it got to him, Tyler gave him an easy out. "Want to pass or share?" He could feel everyone's eyes on him, but they felt different than classroom eyes. No judgment, just patience. He opened his mouth, closed it, his name. He couldn't even say his own name. The stutter caught hard on the first letter. He tried again. Someone in the circle said gently, "Take your time. We're here for it." Something about those words broke through his panic. These people understood. Really understood? His name finally came out, choppy but complete. "First time," he managed to add. Tyler nodded. "Glad you're here." And somehow, in that moment, he actually believed it. After the formal check-in, the group broke into smaller conversations. Tyler came over, sat next to him. "So what brought you here?" He tried to explain. The words coming hard about the presentation, about college being supposed to be different but not being different at all. Tyler listened without interrupting, without finishing sentences, without that look of pity he'd seen so many times before. When he finished, Tyler leaned back. "Yeah, I remember that feeling. Thinking geography would fix me." He smiled. "Spoiler alert, it doesn't. I'm from Seattle. Came here to California thinking I'd leave the stuttering kid behind. But that's not really how it works." Tyler's stutter was present, but he spoke with this confidence that seemed impossible. "The thing is," Tyler continued, "you're not trying to fix yourself. You're trying to free yourself." That distinction hit him hard. He'd spent years trying to fix his stutter. Therapy, exercises, avoidance techniques, word substitutions. All of it was about making the stutter go away. But Tyler was talking about something different, about accepting it and speaking anyway. I still stutter, Tyler said. You probably noticed. But I'm the president of this group. I do presentations in my classes. I talk to girls at parties, he laughed. Well, I try. Sometimes it goes well, sometimes it doesn't. But I'm not hiding anymore. He looked directly at him. That's what this group taught me. You've got a stutter. Okay, so what? You've still got things to say. Over the next few weeks, he became a regular at Thursday meetings. At first, he just listened, watched how people navigated conversations, how they didn't apologize for their stutters, how they owned the space between their words. Slowly, he started participating more, shared about his classes, his roommate, small stuff. The words didn't come easy, but nobody rushed him. The group did exercises, practice conversations where you had to intentionally stutter, which felt bizarre at first. Role-playing job interviews, mock presentations. They'd give each other feedback that was honest but kind. You apologized 3 times for stuttering. Stop apologizing. You didn't do anything wrong. Your eye contact is great. Keep that up. When you're stuck on a word, try not to force it. Pause and start again. Tyler became something like a mentor. He'd been in the group for 2 years and had transformed from someone who apparently barely spoke to someone who couldn't shut up, in the best way. He invited him to coffee outside of meetings. They'd talk about life, about classes, about family. Tyler shared his own story, how he'd been bullied in middle school, how he'd stopped speaking in high school, how college had been his breaking point. I was sitting in my dorm freshman year, Tyler told him one afternoon, and I realized I had a choice. I could spend 4 more years being silent, or I could fight like hell to find my voice. Not a perfect voice, not a fluent voice, but my voice. He took a sip of coffee. So I started showing up to this group. Hated it at first. Felt so vulnerable. But week after week it got easier. Not the talking. That's still hard sometimes. But being okay with the hard parts. That got easier. Something shifted in him during these conversations. Years of shame started to crack. The belief that his stutter made him less than, that it was something to hide, that his voice didn't deserve to be heard. Tyler's simple existence challenged all of that. Here was someone who stuttered openly and obviously but lived fully anyway, spoke in classes, had friends, dated, existed without apologizing for taking up space. He started a blog around week 8 of the semester. Anonymous at first, he wrote about living with a stutter, about the bullying, about the isolation. He poured years of silence into words on a screen, posted it late at night, unsure if anyone would read it. By morning, he had 50 comments. People thanking him, sharing their own stories, saying they felt less alone. The blog became his bridge. He could write fluently, express himself fully, and people responded. But the gap between his written voice and his spoken voice still felt massive. Tyler noticed. You're a great writer, he said after reading several posts. But you're using writing to avoid speaking. I get it, I did that too. But at some point, you've got to trust that what you have to say matters, even if it takes you longer to say it. The presentation for his communication class was coming up. Jennifer had been nice about doing most of the talking, but he felt like a coward. He mentioned it at a Thursday meeting. The group rallied. Let's practice, someone suggested. So he stood in front of 15 people who understood stuttering intimately and tried to present his portion of the speech. It was terrible. He got stuck constantly. His face turned red. Sweat dripped down his back. But nobody laughed. Nobody looked away. They just waited. When he finished, stumbling through 5 minutes that should have taken 2, they clapped. Then they gave feedback, real useful feedback about breathing, about pacing, about what to do when he got stuck. He practiced that speech every Thursday for 3 weeks. Each time it got slightly less terrifying. Not easier exactly, but less terrifying. The group taught him something crucial. The stutter wasn't going away, but his fear of it could. If he was going to speak anyway, he might as well own it. The night before the presentation, Tyler texted him. You've got this. Remember, they're not timing you. They're listening to what you have to say. Your ideas are solid. Trust them. He read that text probably 20 times. Tried to believe it. The presentation day arrived. Standing there with Jennifer in front of the class, he felt all the old panic rising. His turn came. He looked at his note cards. Looked at the class. took a breath, started speaking, stuttered immediately on the second word. The room was silent. His instinct screamed at him to apologize, to make a joke, to deflect. Instead, he paused, started the sentence again, kept going. He stuttered through the whole presentation. More than usual, probably because the pressure was intense. But he kept going. Didn't apologize. Didn't run. Just pushed through. When he finished his section, he was shaking. But he'd done it. Actually done it. After class, Jennifer caught up with him. "That took guts," she said simply. Not pity, just respect. It was the first time someone had acknowledged his stutter as something brave rather than something wrong. That night at the group meeting, he shared what happened. Tyler grinned. "How'd it feel?" He thought about it. "Terrifying," he said honestly. "But I did it anyway." Tyler nodded. "That's the secret. Not that it stops being scary. But you do it scared." Those words settled into his chest like truth. He'd spent so many years waiting to be brave, to be fixed, to be ready. But maybe bravery was just doing the scary thing despite the fear, despite the stutter, despite everything. He left the meeting that night feeling different. Not fixed, not cured, but changed in some fundamental way. For the first time in his life, he'd stopped running from his voice and turned to face it instead, and that made all the difference. Spring semester of sophomore year changed everything. His blog had grown steadily. What started as anonymous late-night posts had become something bigger. He'd dropped the anonymity, started using his real name, posting videos of himself talking about stuttering. The videos were raw and unedited. Him sitting in his dorm room stuttering through his thoughts. Some videos took 15 minutes to say what should have taken 5. But people watched. Thousands of them. The comment section became a community. People with stutters shared their stories. Parents of kids who stuttered asked for advice. Teachers looking for ways to support students reached out. His blog had accidentally become a resource, a gathering place for people who felt as alone as he once had. He'd post something vulnerable, like the memory of being mocked in middle school, and 100 people would respond saying, "Me too." Tyler noticed the shift in him. "You're different this semester," he said one Thursday after their meeting. They were walking back to the dorms, cold February air making their breath visible, more present. "Like you're actually here instead of hiding." It was true. He still stuttered in every conversation, but the shame around it had loosened its grip. He was starting to understand what Tyler had been trying to tell him. The stutter wasn't the problem. The silence he'd built around it was. The email arrived on a Wednesday afternoon in March. He almost deleted it, thinking it was spam. The subject line read, TEDx Speaking Opportunity. His university was hosting a TEDx event and they were looking for student speakers. Someone had seen his blog, particularly a post about how society equates fluent speech with intelligence, and thought he'd be perfect for the event. His first reaction was panic, pure immediate panic. He couldn't even do a 5-minute class presentation without anxiety. How could he possibly stand on a TEDx stage and speak for 18 minutes? The email said they had hundreds of applicants and only 12 spots. He should submit an audition video by the end of the month if interested. Interested. That was generous. He was terrified just reading the email. He closed his laptop and tried to forget about it. Went to class. Did homework. But the email nagged at him. By evening, he'd opened it again and read through the details. The theme was breaking barriers. Speakers would share stories about overcoming obstacles and challenging assumptions. The event would be in November, 8 months away. Hundreds of people in the audience. Cameras recording. The talk would be posted online afterward. Every logical part of his brain screamed no. This was too much, too public, too risky. But there was this tiny voice, newer and quieter, that whispered, what if? What if he could do it? What if his story, his stutter and all, could help someone else? What if this was exactly the kind of thing he needed to do? Thursday's support group meeting felt like fate. The discussion topic was about taking risks. Tyler shared about applying for a summer internship that required phone interviews. Someone else talked about joining a debate club. When it got to him, he mentioned the email. Tried to laugh it off. Obviously, I'm not going to do it. I mean, TEDx? That's for people who can actually talk. The room got quiet. Then Tyler spoke. Why not you? He started to list reasons. Because he'd stutter the whole time. Because people would laugh. Because he'd embarrass himself. Because he wasn't good enough. Tyler let him finish, then said simply, Those are all fears. I asked, why not you? Give me one real reason. He couldn't. The silence stretched. Finally, a girl across the circle, someone who usually stayed quiet, spoke up. I've read your blog. You have something important to say. Don't let your stutter be the reason you don't say it. Others nodded. Someone else added, 18 minutes of stuttering that helps people is better than 18 minutes of perfect silence. He went back to his dorm that night with the email still open on his laptop. Read it again. Then again. At 2 a.m, riding a wave of exhausted courage, he decided to at least film an audition video. Worst case, they'd reject it and he'd never have to think about it again. Best case. He didn't let himself think about the best case. Filming the audition video took 6 hours. Not because the video needed to be long. 5 minutes was the requirement. But he kept messing up, restarting, getting frustrated. His roommate was gone for the weekend, so at least he had privacy for the humiliation. He set up his phone on a stack of books, sat on his bed and tried to talk about why he wanted to speak at TEDx. The stutters came hard and fast. He got stuck on I want for 30 seconds. Watching the playback was brutal. His face turned red. His hands fidgeted. The words lurched out in broken pieces. He looked exactly like what he was, someone struggling to speak. He deleted it and started over. Same result. 3rd take, 4th take, 5th take. All terrible. Around midnight, exhausted and ready to give up, he filmed one more. This time he didn't try to hide the stutter. Didn't try to be perfect. Just talked honestly about his experience. About being bullied. About years of silence. About finding the support group and learning that his voice mattered despite the stutter. About wanting to challenge the idea that fluent speech equals intelligence or worth. He stuttered throughout. But he didn't apologize. Didn't restart. Just kept going. Watching that take back, something felt different. He looked vulnerable, sure. But also real. Genuine, like he actually meant what he was saying. He uploaded it before he could change his mind. Wrote a brief email about his blog and his story and hit send. Then he shut his laptop and tried not to think about it. 3 weeks passed. He assumed he hadn't been selected and felt relieved. The whole thing had been crazy anyway. Then another email arrived. Congratulations. You've been selected to speak at TEDx. His stomach dropped. This was real. He'd actually have to do this. The email outlined next steps. First was a mandatory speaker meeting in 2 weeks where they'd discuss the process, get coaching, start developing talks. 18 minutes on stage. Red circle. Professional filming. November 9th. He looked at his calendar. 8 months to prepare. 8 months to either get ready or back out. Tyler was thrilled when he told him, "This is huge. You're going to crush it." He didn't feel like he'd crush anything except under the weight of his own anxiety. But Tyler's confidence was contagious. "You've got 8 months. We'll practice every week. You're not doing this alone." The first speaker meeting was intimidating. 11 other students, all articulate and confident. They went around introducing themselves and their topics. A pre-med student talking about healthcare access. An engineering major discussing renewable energy. An activist speaking about campus sexual assault awareness. Important topics from people who seemed to have no trouble speaking about them. When it got to him and he stuttered through his introduction, he saw a few exchanged glances. Pity? Concern? He couldn't tell. The speaking coach, a professional named Patricia, pulled him aside afterward. He braced for her to gently suggest he wasn't right for this. Instead, she said, "Your topic is powerful. The barrier you're breaking isn't just your own. It's the assumption that people with speech differences don't belong on stages like this." "That's important," she paused. "This won't be easy. You're going to have to be vulnerable in front of hundreds of people, but if you're willing to do that work, I'll help you." The work was intense. Patricia met with him weekly, separate from the group coaching sessions. They worked on his talk structure first. What story to tell, what points to make, how to open and close. The writing part was easy. He was good at writing. But then came the speaking part. They'd practice sections over and over. Patricia never flinched at his stutters, never rushed him, just coached him through it. When you get stuck on a word, she taught him, don't fight it. Pause, breathe, start again. Own the silence. The audience will wait for you if you show them it's okay to wait. They practiced these pauses. Practiced him getting stuck and recovering without apologizing. It felt unnatural at first, alien. Every instinct screamed at him to say sorry or make a self-deprecating joke. Patricia wouldn't let him. "You're retraining years of shame," she explained. Your brain associates stuttering with humiliation, so it tries to minimize or deflect. But what if stuttering was just a neutral fact about how you speak? Not good, not bad, just real? The idea sounded nice but felt impossible. How could something that caused him so much pain be neutral? The support group became his testing ground. Every Thursday, he'd practice portions of his talk. The group would time him, give feedback, help him refine. Tyler was especially helpful, having experience with public speaking despite his own stutter. Don't memorize it word for word, Tyler advised. Memorize the ideas and the flow. That way, if you get stuck and need to rephrase, you can. Rigid memorization will trap you. By summer, he had a complete draft. 18 minutes about his journey from silence to speaking. About bullying and shame. About the support group and finding community. About how society measures people's worth by their speech fluency. About challenging that assumption. On paper, it was strong. Patricia loved it. But standing in his dorm room practicing aloud, it felt impossible. How would he ever deliver this to an actual audience? His parents knew about the TEDx talk. His mom was supportive but worried. Are you sure you want to do this? It's so public. What if people are cruel? His dad was more direct. Big opportunity. Don't back out because you're scared. You've got something to prove. Both reactions stressed him out in different ways. His mom's concern made him doubt himself. His dad's pressure made it about performance rather than message. August arrived, and with it, the reality that November was close. 3 months until the event. The other speakers were polishing their talks, doing practice runs. He was still stumbling through his opening paragraph. Patricia scheduled extra sessions. They'd meet 3 times a week now, intensively working through every section. She recorded him practicing, made him watch it back, pointed out patterns. You apologize with your body language before you even speak. Shoulders hunched, eyes down. Stand tall. You have every right to be on that stage. September brought group rehearsals, all 12 speakers in an auditorium, taking turns practicing. Watching the others was both inspiring and discouraging. They were good. Really good. Confident gestures, strong voices, compelling stories. When his turn came, he walked to the red circle painted on the stage, looked out at 11 people in the seats, began speaking, stuttered immediately, kept going. Made it through 3 minutes before his anxiety overwhelmed him and he had to stop. Patricia called a break, walked him outside. What happened? He tried to explain. The pressure, the comparison, the feeling of not belonging. She listened, then said something that shifted his perspective. They're telling their stories their way. You're telling yours. Your story includes the stutter. That's not a flaw in your presentation. That's your presentation. Stop trying to deliver a talk despite your stutter. Deliver a talk that includes it. Own it completely. October was a blur of practice. He worked on his talk constantly. In his dorm, in empty classrooms walking across campus. The words became familiar friends even when they came out broken. He stopped trying to sound like the other speakers and started sounding like himself. Stutter and all, Tyler attended every practice he could, offering encouragement and honest feedback. You're getting there, Tyler would say. I can see you believing in it more. The week before the event, final rehearsals happened in the actual auditorium where TEDx would be held. Standing on that stage, seeing the rows of red seats, the professional lighting, the cameras being set up, reality hit hard. This was happening. In 6 days, hundreds of people would sit in those seats. Thousands more would eventually watch online. There was no backing out now. He either did this or lived with the regret of not trying. Patricia gathered all the speakers backstage after the final rehearsal. She looked at each of them seriously. You're ready, all of you. Tomorrow night, trust your preparation, trust your stories, and remember why you wanted to do this in the first place. He thought about that. Why had he wanted to do this? Because someone reading his blog might feel less alone. Because he was tired of hiding. Because maybe, just maybe, he had something worth saying. The night before TEDx, he couldn't sleep. Lay in bed running through his talk. Terrified he'd forget everything. Terrified he'd stutter so badly no one would understand. Terrified they'd laugh or worse, pity him. Tyler texted around midnight. Stop overthinking. You've got this. See you tomorrow. Simple words, but they helped. He finally fell asleep around 3, his talk playing on repeat in his dreams. Words flowing perfectly in the safety of sleep. The day of TEDx arrived cold and bright. He woke up at 6 even though he didn't go on until evening. His hands were already shaking. His roommate wished him luck on the way out to class, but he barely heard it. All he could think about was the red circle, the lights, the faces. 18 minutes that could either validate years of work or confirm his worst fears about himself. The speakers had to arrive early for final tech checks. Walking into the auditorium at 3 in the afternoon, seeing the seats starting to fill with early arrivals made everything intensely real. Stage crew adjusted lights. Sound technicians tested microphones. The other speakers practiced in corners, their voices overlapping in nervous energy. He found a quiet spot backstage and tried to run through his opening lines. The words stuck in his throat even in whisper. Not a good sign. Patricia found him around 4:30. She could probably see the panic on his face. "Come here," she said, leading him to an empty side room. They sat down and she made him look at her. "This feeling right now, this terror, it's normal. Every speaker feels it. But you've prepared for this. You know your talk. You know why it matters. When you walk out there, don't think about the audience as judges. Think of them as people who need to hear what you have to say." He nodded, trying to absorb her words. She continued, "And listen, you're going to stutter out there. We both know it. Probably more than in practice because of nerves. That's okay, expected. The audience knows it too. They read your bio. They're not there to watch you be perfect. They're there to hear your truth. So give it to them." Stutter and all, Tyler showed up around 5. He'd been at the support group meeting, and about 10 members had come with him to watch. Knowing they were in the audience helped somehow. These people who'd seen him at his most vulnerable, who'd watched him practice sections of this talk dozens of times. They wouldn't judge. They'd understand. "We're in the 3rd row," Tyler told him. "You got this." The event started at 6. He was scheduled 7th out of 12 speakers. Backstage, he watched the first talks on a monitor. They were incredible. Polished and powerful. The healthcare student had the audience leaning forward. The environmental engineer got applause in the middle of his talk. Each one raised the bar higher. When the 5th speaker walked off stage to thunderous applause, his stomach turned over. How could he follow these people? The 6th speaker was wrapping up. 2 minutes left. Then it would be his turn. He stood up, rolled his shoulders, tried to shake out the tension. His heart was pounding so hard he could feel it in his throat. Patricia appeared beside him. "Remember," she said quietly, "this isn't about being perfect. It's about being real. You're the only one who can tell this story. Now go tell it." The stage manager gave him a signal. The 6th speaker exited to applause. He walked toward the stage entrance, legs somehow moving despite feeling like they weighed 1,000 pounds. The announcer's voice came through the speakers. "Our next speaker has spent most of his life believing his voice didn't matter. Tonight he's here to prove that wrong. Please welcome." His name echoed through the auditorium. He stepped into the lights. The red circle glowed on the stage floor like a target, or maybe a spotlight. He walked to it, feeling every eye in the room on him. Hundreds of people. The lights were so bright he could barely see past the first few rows, but he knew they were all there, watching, waiting. He reached the red circle, stopped, took a breath, opened his mouth to say his carefully rehearsed first line, and nothing came out. His mouth opened and closed. The word was stuck, completely stuck. The silence stretched. 5 seconds, 10. He could feel the audience getting uncomfortable. 15 seconds. This was it. His worst nightmare. Frozen on stage, unable to speak, proving everyone right whoever doubted him.